Those used to not be valued and now they're valued, like, it just depends. So I would say that I would never want to be punitive about codifying somebody's natural resources to be different than somebody else's. So I would rather have it applied over the whole area if we would do a natural I would like I would say we just treat everything like that.
So if,
Do we have to
regardless of it being in a PUD, you're saying you would like every natural resources?
No, I'm saying I would take whatever the corridor is and extend it to everything, rather than just being only this area should, like, I'm against the concept of having specific areas have different codes based on what the perception of the natural resources around it are.
Okay.
So you might, what I'm hearing then is you're more open to a fixed percentage of any development, rather than trying to cherry pick.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it's got this on it.
Oh, yeah, I think that, it punishes landowners who have whatever everyone else perceives as a high-quality natural resource. Oh, all the other people can do this, but because you have a nice oak stand, you are limited in what you can do. Like, it's.
Or they have more of a bargaining tool for a PUD, is the other way to look at it. If that's what we're
Yeah.
saying we value for a PUD.
That's true, but then you penalize a person who has what other people consider to be not.
Well, that's why it would only apply to properties that are within the identified areas. So we're not saying that a property that doesn't have, like, all the trees are cut down because it was used for farmland.
Yeah.
We're not penalized, they're not saying that they can't do a PUD. We would look at that as a separate situation. What we're doing is saying when you have a property that has those sources that we want attention. We want the attention to be to preserve those in however we can. And it would probably be unreasonable to say you need to reserve all of it. But we
Yeah.
could say that attention needs to be made to preserve some of it and most of it if possible. And depending on it, like, I know for one property we're looking at right now, nothing official's been submitted, but it's within the Shoreland Overlay District, and it's low density. And I know they will not be able to, this would be a perfect example of a low density PUD where they would like to preserve, and there is a community of upland that's considered high value. And they're, like, this is a perfect bargaining tool for your PUD, like, this is, so do something about that, and that was the direction I gave them. So I think that, I don't see it as necessarily a hindrance, I see it as, if this is what's important to you, let's identify that, and then I can use that as
Sure.
a bargaining tool at the beginning, so.
Well, it's
Would
it's
it-
too subjective for me, so
Fair enough.
that's where I'll end up. And I think we agree with some concepts, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around that, I guess.
Would it help to get more specific like this, or leave it open? It already sounds like you've got the creativity going on up there and
I'm
stuff.
definitely trying, and I'm trying to understand what each of you want. I think that's part of being a good planner and being able to convey that
You'll
message.
never figure us out.
And it's gonna change, and so that's.
You're
so
right.
My issue with changing the PUD ordinance, is the idea of the PUD is to allow for flexibility. So when it simply doesn't make sense for the 25 open space, but the PUD does make sense in other areas, and they're able to offer us something like a lift station, or land for a future, you know what I mean? Like, there's what I think would be beneficial is if we had a long talk to figure out what it is that we want, what is it that you would be okay with trading, put a policy in place, and that allows us to be much more flexible than updating the code every time something comes along that we didn't like. But I think that would be very beneficial to staff, and then when I'm talking to developers who are like, hey, I'm looking at this area, what is it that you guys want to see? I can talk to them at the real beginning stages about what it is that they want, or what it is that we want as a city. And I can be like, no, that's not going to work. There's no way they're going to grant a PUD for that. And
How receptive do you think developers are to that? Because I feel like in recent experience, there's been feedback and it was just disregarded.
and I can totally see that point, but the conversation I just had with a developer looking at the land, that I was talking about, is very receptive to everything I had to say. So I think, and I don't know if it's gonna be the perfect development, but I do think, I told him, like, a sticking point for, a recent application was the lot sizes were smaller on the border of a previous development. So if you can match the lot sizes here, and then you can maybe, go a little more denser north, then I think that would help get this to, so I'm learning from you guys, I'm learning what's important. But it takes time for me to learn exactly what your desires are. And so I think a long conversation would be a wonderful work session to be able to learn exactly what it is. And sometimes we might not know until we see something that we don't like, and we'll just have to adjust from there. But I would prefer to put a policy in place and to have more one-on-one conversations with you than put something very strict in the standard where all of a sudden we're having people request variances on a PUD when the PUD is supposed to prevent variances.
Gotcha. That does actually bring up something else that I wanted to add as another potential thing to look into, which, I'm trying to remember which city this was, but one of our neighbors, has a requirement for PUDs, specifically residential PUDs, to go through a sketch plan process at the planning commission, followed by the council. Just kind of food for thought for trying to get more feedback on a sketch plan before we get to the point where it's already a submitted plan.
I like that idea, and I think it would also be helpful if we had in our process at our option whether there's a site walk as part of that sketch review.
Yeah, I haven't seen that specifically as a requirement, but maybe.
Wait, what?
If it,
Like,
So when we were doing research on conservation subdivision systems, most of the cities that do that, and the folks that we talked with who helped those cities put the systems in place, spoke very highly of trying to get the developer and the planning commission representatives and the council and neighbors to do a site walk early in the concept.
Oh, I thought you
Sidewalk,
said
I thought you said
sidewalk.
sidewalk too.
Sorry,
I
sidewalk.
thought you said sidewalk too.
just
So
a
then you
sidewalk,
can
any
get, then you
sidewalk.
can get face-to-face.
Yeah, so you have blue in here and red and highlights.
Yes,
So
very
the-
confusing.
Yeah, so
I apologize, the highlights are mine as
Oh,
well.
okay.
I was
So you're
trying to find
supposed
a
to
way
blame
to
Jeremy. Don't-
transfer.
a word count for
When we
PUD.
were just having some PDF. Michelle tried, I tried, we were having some major issues with trying to get, so I apologize for the highlighting. That is, and to your question about site walks, I know I've seen in other cities, but it would also be an impact to our budget, as we've talked about. I've seen cities do neighborhood meetings at the concept plan, but that's a lot of staff time and something that we haven't looked into before, so.
We do usually encourage applicants to reach out, but yeah, we don't have anything in our code. I know Shakopee, which is where I live, so that's why I bring it up. I know I was talking to a business owner, and he was saying that it was required per the code. They had to hold
In Victoria. we
a
had it.
neighborhood meeting for them moving across the street into a new building.
Couldn't that cost be required of the applicant as a,
Certainly, I'm more so.
I think,
staff-
I think to be sensitive to the fact that we don't have a lot of meeting space, and so it
Yep.
would probably have to be here, and
Yep.
so then it would be staff.
What-
So
what-
I think there would be some staff
Gotcha.
cost to it at this point.
A neighborhood meeting for the neighbors of the,
Next to any concept plan. So when I worked for the city of Victoria, anytime a concept plan would come in for a new addition, any of the neighbors that are next to it within a certain radius were invited to, similar to.
Basically, anyone who's
a
gonna get that
pre-public
public hearing
hearing.
notice,
Yeah, a pre-public hearing, so you at least got to see what the project was, get your questions answered beforehand. It did seem to smooth a lot of, or some of the questions that you get at a public hearing.
Well, and I went to a PUD luncheon by the Sensible Land Use Coalition recently, and one of the developers that spoke said that they found a lot of success through early engagement, such as those neighborhood meetings. So I don't know that it's necessarily a hindrance to them, and hopefully they wouldn't view it as such, but I think that's definitely something we could add to our processes that could be helpful, and just kind of reducing some of the anxiety, especially since we don't necessarily have readily available information until the week before a meeting. And I think that it could also, you know, if there's something that can be addressed, then it allows them to address things early on in the plans before they've spent too much money on a specific idea that they're kind of willing to die on a hill over.
So I hear Natalie's feedback that she doesn't want to make it overly restrictive. I'm wondering if we can make it a little more broad, but I'm scarred from past experience where we have not negotiated effectively. And so I don't have a lot of trust in any council to do that well, given all of the hindrances that we're forced to operate under. So I feel like we need to put something in place to create additional checkpoints and greater control for council. And I'm open to how we would do that. I think the 4/5 is one way we could do that.
And that is something I've seen, I believe Medina, so they do PUD a little bit differently. They have two PUD types, PUD 1 and PUD 2. And I believe any rezoning into PUD for them does require that 2/3 majority for any PUD. I thought it was interesting how you worded it.
Can I ask real quick?
Yeah.
We don't have anything in the works right now as developments, properties, anything like that? There's no, we've got the one preliminary plat coming, final plat, is there anything coming?
So,
Where I'm going to is, here's our ordinances, here's the plan, here's the zoning and those kind of things. Can we start saying no now instead of everything being okay to be a PUD and follow the current ordinances and current zoning of our properties? Or are we too far gone?
Well, I think the issue is, if we want to do that, we have to address our underlying zoning districts to make the lot sizes smaller, because right now, I think we'd also have to address our shoreland overlay district. Because right now, the lots that I'm seeing that are up for development, there is sufficient reason for the PUD in terms of being able to meet our other goals. And the bigger lot sizes just aren't as in demand. There's a lot of people who don't necessarily want the bigger yards. They would prefer a bigger house. And I get that that's kind of a pull, like we want the, but I do think that larger community open space is more desired than a larger lot for the people who want to buy in rural part of Corcoran will buy in the rural part of Corcoran. We have those kind of developments coming in too. But in terms that's even like our open space and preservation plat in the rural area, which we have a sketch plan coming in too, that there's no minimum lot size for that. So those are smaller lots, and you're preserving more common space, and that is desirable. There is a market for that. So I guess I've kind of gone off track here, so I apologize. But what I'm trying to say is, to all that's and say we're not doing any PUDs, we are essentially saying that the low-density parcels that are within the 2020 to 25 staging plan cannot be developed, or it's going to be very difficult for them to develop, and I think we'll run into issues.
On the 3 to 5.
So we'd either have to address that first, and then we can make that comfortable over blanket statement, or I think we have a discussion as to what it is that we really want and what we value. We can put broad values in the PUD ordinance. I have no problem with that. I think that is great. And then keep kind of working through the kinks here. So.
When you say not developable or not, it's not feasible to meet our other values, are you talking about density specifically?
Yeah, basically they wouldn't be able to meet density, and so then they're in violation of our comp plan. And as I've said before, it might, on a 40-acre site, one development, that might not make or break us, but when we're talking about every parcel, in the MUSA, which has, and a lot of our parcels are very limited with the wetlands.
So you'd say not every, but majority of our parcels can't meet our zoning districts, our straight zoning districts?
And
Majority
if
of
they
parcels.
do, we're probably not going to get the open space that you want to see if that's the true value. So,
Correct.
They'll look just like Maple Grove, right?
exactly. Yeah, I mean, Brooklyn Park has no PUD. Brooklyn Park has no PUDs. So, and so when they have plats, they're not doing nearly anything about the open space. They do have a lot of parks. That was a value that they identified long ago. So to be fair, like every house is within a mile of a park. I think that's why they named themselves Brooklyn Park. The individual developments do not have the open space that I think we want to see here to make it different.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the open space is a big part of it. I think the issue right now, at least to me, is we seem to be right now getting not the open space, not the larger or wider lots, not the bigger side setbacks. We're kind of not getting any of the three. Yeah. But I think your point's valid that if we went that other route specifically, then we wouldn't be getting the open space, which is clearly been something we've talked about a lot. So,
To Dean, your question about we have a lot of interest in the community, and so folks are certainly reaching out to us on different potentials. Do we have any current preliminary plats that have come?
So we have a sketch plan, which is an OSMP in the rural area that we'll be looking at on the 11th or 14th, sorry. Yeah, and I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's a pretty strong plan. And then.
And that is what, rural ag, R1, R2?
So it's rural residential, and
Okay.
it's a current farmstead, and they would be continuing farming the open space that they were preserving, and they're preserving about 45 acres of open space.
Ooh, it's one of those new farm
Recent-
neighborhoods?
Recent posted one, okay.
Oh, when they keep farmland but build lots around.
Yeah, yep, that's exactly what.
Agri-hoods, I think they're called.
Fun. I didn't know that's what they were called. So they.
I'm on the cutting edge of
all silo-related
right?
design.
Agri-hoods.
So, and then, like I said, there's a couple people that we've spoken to about, they're in the real beginning stages. And I'm thinking that a sketch plan is going to be coming soon for a property within the MUSA that's low density, it has that shoreland overlay, and I don't think it's going to be possible for them to develop without a PUD.
Is there gonna be townhouses? I mean,
No,
we just keep
but it,
throwing so many
but they're talking
townhouses.
about detached villa products primarily. There was no talk about twin homes or townhomes. So yeah, that one I actually think that where they were talking about, they're the ones that said they wanted to preserve open space. And I was like, are you kidding? This is a dream. Like, you guys are so amenable. It was the best conversation I've had with a developer in a while. And then there was there's another one, but it's not in the low density. It's in our mixed use area in the northeast. And they've been waiting a very long time to start the process because we spoke to them originally before the moratorium went in place. And that's probably going to be a PUD too. They're talking about a variety of townhomes and single-family home.
And what is it guided?
It's guided mixed use, and so we're gonna have to have a conversation about what that means to us. So, and
Is that the DMU versus MU discussion?
it's actually GMU, because it's along County Road 30, so it's not DMU, which is our southeast district downtown area, so this is more northeast on County Road 30. But I do think it's a discussion of, must we have commercial in our general mixed use, or are we okay with a residential development? So it's going to be a larger discussion, and I anticipate a sketch plan coming in soon. So no preliminary plats, but we are talking to people regularly,
Okay.
and a lot of them are PUDs, and some of our properties are very challenging, and some of our goals that we want, the street connections we want, do limit it. But I think that overall, if we again, identify what it is that we want to see, I think that I'm going to be able to get better at understanding what it is that's going to get something approved and going to be able to convey like, that's not going to go over well. I think that there's probably still going to be people who come in that try to push their limits, and they're always going to be that, like, they're always going to present the plan that they think they can get away with first. But I think that some of it's the learning curve, and I feel like I'm getting much more in tune with what it is that you want. But if we can have further discussions about it.
Yeah, for me, the multi-unit housing in a residential and stuff,
Question
we
on,
had enough. That's me. Bigger lots, smaller homes, get people out in their yards. I guess I'm a little too much old school there of,
I would
having that.
completely agree with you. Jeremy, when you drafted I'm forgetting which part of this, of talking about adding a use that's not in the current use, would that be an example of it? So if you're adding townhomes into low-density residential guided area, townhomes aren't a permitted use
Right.
in our low-density residential. So
So
that,
if the parcel was zoned all low density,
4 hours from kicking off the 2000.
that happened to me on the way in.
if the parcel was zoned all low
I
density,
get
my
it.
interpretation of what I intended to write was anything that's listed in one of the low densities would be eligible, but if it's not listed in one of the low density zones, it wouldn't be. So townhomes are in the in the medium density zoning district, so that would, in my mind, restrict you from doing townhomes.
Whereas twin
In a
homes
PUD.
are in one of the low density.
But twins would be, because that's in RSF 3.
Yep, that makes sense.
I think staff is working on coming up with a time to talk about, and we're looking at ideas for bringing forward
Okay.
a discussion on PUDs, because we know how important that is.
Perfect.
So we anticipate doing that sometime in July.
July 28th.
Will
July
that,
28th.
will that include I assume it'll include the change in the lot sizes and some of the open space provisions and the whole 9 yards, or is it?
So our.
You're thinking a
our
work session,
goal-
right?
Yeah.
Our goal for that, and is to understand what are the benefits that you want to see, so we can move forward with that. More so, what are you looking for benefits from? Are we wanting the open space? Are we wanting,
Or yeah, when open space is impossible, what else do we value? That might give a developer some opportunities to work with us, just to kind of define the list a bit further. And I think that does go hand in hand with it. But yeah, I just think this is a very large discussion. And I don't want to sound like I'm all about PUDs. Like, I understand the concerns with it, I really do. But I also have seen where it can be valuable in other cities. Like, I know driving in on 55, that old garden center, like right,
Dundee.
Dundee,
that's being redeveloped.
done gone, no.
Yeah, and it's being redeveloped as a PUD, and I sat through a presentation with the city planner talking about that PUD, and the amenities that are provided through that are just, I thought it was so cool, because there's a lot of conservation aspects to it. There's a lot of pollution that was the result of the gardening center, and so they're cleaning up a lot of that.
Right.
And so that was kind of one of the benefits that they were able to provide, is to clean up this area. And then they were able to get PUD and how it was developed. And so the city really felt strongly that it was a strong development. And I don't know if there's an open space component, but that's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes there are other values that may come up. They're like, oh, actually, that does make a lot of sense, and that is valuable to us.
What is going there?
It's
It's a mix of apartments, medical,
Yeah.
and part of the church that's currently behind it,
Got it.
getting some additional facilities.
Yeah.
Right, thought, I've never
Yeah.
seen it all.
Yeah, so
right?
I
That
think
was
that
the same
there's a place and a time for it, and I just do think that a lot of our parcels can
Yeah.
be quite difficult to work on, so
And-
I would just hate to have a situation where there is a good idea, but because of our code being so strict, again, all of a sudden they're seeking a variance from a PUD. And the very point of the PUD is, like, what I would even like to say is like a situation where, Richfield has a CUP PUD, which is a little different style. But, so if they have a parcel that comes in that has like 4 or 5 variances they're requesting, instead of doing that, they can do the CUP for a PUD. And it's a little confusing, but basically, instead of rezoning it, you're able to get a conditional use permit, so you don't have to go through the process of getting 5 variances and justifying that. You can just so I think that there are potential tools that we can look at to make it stronger. And I think like for like our downtown area, I think that like that CUP tool could actually be very useful with our downtown businesses, and like with ProTech coming in and requesting 5, 6 different variances, we could handle it much differently and much cleaner through a PUD, so.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's just a factor of what we've seen development-wise, but I think most of the conversation, at least right now, or concern is specifically regarding residential PUDs and specifically low-density residential PUDs. Maybe we'll start seeing some more of the medium-density stuff once we start seeing more of that type of development. But I think as of now, it's mostly regarding low-density residential PUDs has been what the issues historically been. So maybe that's where we tailor some of the discussion at upcoming work session. But I think that's a good place to start with a lot of these ideas. And kind of take it from there. I know one question that's going to come up, because I know staff's concerned about it, would be timing. If we're going to look at doing some of these.
Yes.
I'm not even on that page anymore. Some of the PUD updates. The other big one that we talked about was rental ordinance.
Yes.
Do we have any thoughts on, well, do we have any idea of time? Let's say we picked one and wanted to run with it. Are we talking 6 months? Are we talking?
Depends on which one we're talking about.
Yeah, so one of the things Natalie and I are also working on is coming up with these are the different things that we've talked about. This is our estimated time it would take on each one, so you guys can then help us narrow the scope. So we've gotten some
Gotcha.
additional items that we've wanted to look into. Where do those fall in our next 6 months?
Natalie, can I ask you, and I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but do you have experience writing rental ordinances?
I don't have experience writing rental ordinances, but I am up for the task if I'm being charged with it. I think that I would have to work closely with Matt on it.
Kevin's got some time too.
I'll tell you something. Kevin,
I'm never gonna give up on
he
it.
writes his ordinances, so if you're assigning it to Kevin, you are therefore assigning it to me. So, anyway, but I am up for the task. It's going to be something new, but a lot of this is.
You seem to be on top of things.
Well, thank you.
And a quick learner.
Would it be an option to find a model ordinance from the league, adopt it, and then do a moratorium to study how we would want to modify it in more detail with more work and not?
Potentially, I think the only issue with that is I don't know, we would have to allow people time that currently rent to register. So I don't know if we'd be able to quickly turn around. I think we'd have to provide.
I
like
spoke with the
window.
city attorney on that exact issue. That's the only challenge is in getting it implemented. It just does take some time to get it implemented.
Yeah.
But not something that we couldn't necessarily do. We had talked about.
We just have to allow some window for people to register who are already renting, I think.
It's still like, just what I talked about, why can't we just do it?
That's what I just told him. Just do it and then wait to see
We would
what
also need to
happens.
get a rental inspector on board, I think.
That's the big thing, yeah.
Matt said he'd do it last meeting.
Oh, sweet.
Really?
He had all that extra time.
No discussion for budget priorities, so that
Yeah.
is something that
Yeah,
we heard loud and clear.
I'm gonna
We would
have
just have
Public
no way of
Works
enforcing
and
it until we have someone that
Right.
can.
Public Safety
do it.
just hating me pretty soon.
So I guess regarding budgeting that we should have brought up earlier, maybe that is
That
something
is
we,
one item that I
did
believe
mention that.
Council-
Oh, did you? Okay.
Threw that in.
Good deal.
So that's,
So what comes first, then, a rental
well, that's what we need to figure out what,
CUP,
depending on what the PUD, depending on what the,
PUD.
one of those.
Because CUP is one of the things that.
Depending on the
Natalie.
timing of what, I think once they have a better idea of
CPUD.
what all the PUD updates would include, we'd have a better idea of timelines for each, and then we could pick based on if we were to start in August
Right.
with rental, or start in August with PUD, when would we be done with that, and when could we start on the other? Or when could we start on one and then move on to the other?
But we have 2 planners, right?
2 planners? I would love to have 2 planners. If you're telling me Dwight can go full-time, let's do it, but that's a budget discussion.
One is, rental one is so much more straightforward, I think, than the
I would
CUP one.
think so, yeah.
Like, we might nibble on the edges of what we agree with, but I think the concepts we're all 5 in the same.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be more of like, if we're gonna do the rental ordinance, we could do a very straightforward bare bone one. But I think it's a matter of getting it effective when we have a rental inspector on board, so that we can actually enforce it.
Right. So maybe when we have this work session on the PUD, could staff also come together with just a really rough timeline of what it would take time it would take to have something up and running for
the rental.
For the rental.
The need for an inspector might push you to do the PUD first.
And that may be, yeah,
mean-
that may be.
I mean, if we have no rental places, like,
Right. Yeah, until that, it's,
but we don't, I mean, no, I'm saying the need for an inspector is hardly such a, I know that we need a concept of one, right? But
One thing we discussed, yeah.
Well, I would say one thing to note is we do have, through our utility billing, there are some properties that are being rented right now. I can tell you from doing utility billing, we do have some,
and they're allowed to.
and because they're allowed to. So, and they're usually single-family homes in the utility billing area. But it's not a huge number of them, but certainly that's something to consider, and
There are a few numbers, and also not in our utility billing area that we interact with. So my only caution would be is passing something without doing appropriate studying could have some unintended consequences with people who are currently renting, that we just have to be cautious that we don't know about, because there is a fair amount out there, whether it's people transitioning family, from generations and filling gaps to biding time until they can do something else with their land, or there's quite a few of them that we come across.
And I think to John's point, there's a lot of that's pretty straightforward. I would imagine is out there, and some model ordinances, like you mentioned, Jeremy, too, of exceptions to that. We talked about some exceptions previously when we discussed rental ordinance in terms of if it's, owning a couple properties or what that cutoff would be. I would imagine the specifics we'd need to figure out, but the concept of how those carve-outs are kind of made should be out there pretty readily, I think.
And I know like Brooklyn Park, they have like a carve out for family members.
Mhm.
But I think the issue is, how do we define family members? If
Yep.
someone's third cousin's living there, is that still a family member? Because they're not gonna have the same last name, so how are we proving that? Are they submitting a family tree?
Right,
Like,
that's the tough stuff we got.
DNA.
Genetic testing.
Get a database.
you just need a little spot in City Hall for DNA testing. We'll just run a lab.
Yeah, people love when the government does that. Okay, so I think we got a
Okay.
game plan for going forward, and we'll figure out some timelines
Moving
next.
Forward with that.
Perfect.
Thanks for spending some time on this,
Yeah.
Jeremy.
We'll go on to 10E,
Perfect.
which is,
Is a right of entry agreement.
yes,
Motion to approve.
we have a second.
Second.
Perfect.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Can I just thank Kevin for moving this forward? It was, yes, it was a last minute addition, but we do believe it's going to be a win for the city in moving that forward. There's going to be cost savings in having to not do work twice.
Potentially
Yes.
some substantial cost savings. Good job, Kevin. And just to clarify, did everyone vote, or did I miss on the?
I said aye.
Okay, I'm really bad at picking that up sometimes, so I wanted to make sure, because I only heard 2 for sure. Okay, it was unanimous.
I just had to question, this is addressing the drainage on the north side of 10.
No, it's in the general vicinity of that, so.
Okay,
Just real quick background, Hennepin County is doing what they call a cold, in-place replacement of the road. It's what they did on County Road 50
Right.
years ago. They were gonna do it last year, but in one of their routine inspections, there's a culvert, just northwest of the area you're talking about, Councilmember Barroncamp. And it's really the outlet of the drainage from our city park, and they want to replace a large culvert. It's categorized as a bridge, but it's a large culvert. They need to replace that. It's actually northwest.
Oh, sorry.
It's the next one
This one?
up. Keep going up, north. Keep going, yeah.
oh, the one all the way up there,
Yep, so
okay.
it's actually another
Got it.
right there, right in that tree area. Yep, so that's where the culvert is. So just west of where the turn lanes are with Rush Creek. So they need to replace that bridge. They approached us because that's the land that we bought from the Rockford School District.
Okay.
And then with our city park planning, that's actually the road connection, the north road connection to 10 would be. So when they approached us about an easement, we were able to recognize that through the team as, hey, we don't want to extend a significant large culvert, go through the permitting process, the headaches, the design, the expense to just extend a culvert 20 feet to accommodate a future turn lane. So we basically requested that they extend the culvert so that we can still build the turn lane whenever we
Okay.
have to extend the pipe underneath it. So, in exchange for basically wetland and drainage area that's needs to be maintained for drainage, so. And then we also required a no-rise certification to make sure we weren't impacting upstream and downstream, because that's a sensitive corridor,
Okay.
floodplain and whatnot, so. It worked out, just last minute, apologize, we know we don't like to do that, but they want to start construction soon, they got materials, so we wanted to expedite it with the long week. They're starting the 11th of July, so that whole County Road 10 corridor will be busy this summer. We will be maintaining access to the park and Rush Creek Reserve, but it'll get busy on County Road 10 here in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Good to know.
And they're responsible to process the ultimate, easement, so all costs are borne on them.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I said yes.
Perfect. Okay, then we'll go on to 10E, which is the right of entry agreement.
Can I make a motion to approve?
I think
Did we just do that?
We just
did.
did that one.
Sorry,
We're-
10F.
10F. So-
The title of this one threw me off earlier, too.
Sorry.
No,
about
it's
that.
my bad. Go right ahead.
The 10F is the Recruitment and Retention Survey Subcommittee. We had talked about this in
Oh,
the
yeah.
work session, so it'd just be appointing 2 members. I think we identified.
Jeremy, me,
Jeremy
and Matt.
Yeah, that works for me. I'll make a motion to appoint
Perfect.
them as a subcommittee for that.
Second.
You don't have to, okay.
We don't have to make it doesn't have to be a motion, but can be.
Yeah,
Do we have a second?
guys, If you want,
I'll
if you
second.
want to just appoint.
Perfect. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Here's where I got confused was, it's actually 11B is the item that I keep thinking is in 10.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So 11A, active planning applications, don't have any particular updates on that.
No, just our regular planning.
Perfect.
Update. for-
And 11B.
Yes, and thank you, Mayor and Council. So the title of this item is reciprocal easement agreement generally. We wanted to bring this forward as a staff update for council because the St. Therese project is moving forward and we wanted just to make sure that folks on council knew what was moving forward. They are proposing to move forward with with some work within the linear park, and we wanted to make sure that council was aware of that. Really, it allows for some stockpile of material in a few places, but also a fenced-in area that has storage materials and parking. Kevin can probably pick up where I'm lacking here, but really, this, part of this was related to this St. Therese project. There, with the purchase, we did have a reciprocal easement agreement requirement. The details were to be finalized. We are finalizing those details. Want to make sure council is aware that just down the street from City Hall, there's a significant construction project going on, and just if now is the time as we're finalizing this, if you have comments to help us.
Can I make a
Move it
motion to
forward.
approve?
It's not even, it's.
It was not even
just
an
an update, so we don't.
approval.
Oh, okay.
It's just making sure that if there are things you would like us to negotiate on behalf of the city, like a certain height
That would-
restrictions or things like that,
That would be one thing for me. I think you talked to me earlier about it being fenced in,
I
and
believe the yellow area is all fenced in, is that correct?
Yeah, I would assume it would be or could be, so it's a little bit complicated because you're talking about such a significant project that we haven't had. I mean, they're gonna bring in a couple cranes to help construct this, so it's gonna be, it's gonna look like an active construction site.
yeah, and I would think most of it needs to be fenced in general anyway
Yeah.
for safety reasons.
Yeah, so they might fence certain areas for materials being, for theft reasons, they might
Yep.
do it for screening reasons.
No
Really, the
sight line
premise
for
is,
traffic,
What's that?
no sight lines for City Hall as far as traffic and stuff goes,
No,
no
it's-
worries there,
It'll
far
be
enough south.
It'll be pushed into the development a little ways.
Okay,
But it's really gonna kind of be a work in it's gonna be, it's set up, it was set up as a term in the sale, it's in the development contract. We're working to formalize it to some degree, but it's gonna be fluid. So if there's something significant that they're requesting, we'd probably share that, we would share that with you. It's really to say, hey, there's a significant kind of new type of construction coming. We're working to work through everything to minimize it, but it's gonna change. We can't anticipate everything. So it's more of a heads up that, hey, it's coming. If you see a concern, let's work with St. Therese to address it. But it's gonna be an active site. You're talking
Yep.
multiple, trades crews as the scope, 4-story building, underground parking. Like I said, cranes set up on the site. It's an 18 months to 24 months build if everything goes well. It's just a different expectation. We want to just set people off to early on that it's like what you see in other areas where it's going to be active daily around there, and they're going to use these areas for construction vehicle parking. We're trying to keep everything on the site so we don't encroach into City Hall. So by giving them the linear park, it keeps it out of City Hall. So we're just,
construction
it's a
times and such.
partnership, right? This has been kind of agreed to. We're kind of frameworking the details with this. And
Construction times and such, is
they're
it
following the city's ordinances for construction times, yeah.
heads up to the folks across the street? I know there's not a lot of residents there, but is it possible to give them a heads up on this is all gonna be coming, what to expect? Just a one-page summary, and
Yeah.
if St. Therese can make that,
Yeah, we
Put that
generally
together.
haven't done anything like that, but it doesn't mean that we ask that they put something together. They would have been noticed as part of the public hearing for the plat and whatnot, so they know that the project is.
Could we put a message on the,
just something
Board up
that
front?
says
We could
you are going to
look at some
see.
Sort of option to communicate, whether it's on the city's website or doing some.
I think if
sort of
it's out,
notification.
if it's out there, a lot of people would see it.
Yeah.
Just, construction starting or anticipated start.
It'll be self-evident,
Yeah,
I mean-
it will be, yes, definitely.
for real.
Yep, it's,
An extra week of notice
Real bill.
probably won't.
No one will notice, and
Anyone.
no one will read the notice. They'll notice that
see
there's
the
something
cranes.
going on.
yeah.
And then we don't need to notice because they'll know.
They might be curious how long it'll take, so maybe.
Yes, I think maybe
Good
that's
internet
something we
search.
can work on.
Yeah, and maybe in one of our next newsletters, something we can put an article in there about some of that info. The only things that catch my eye about it would be the dirt stockpile, which might just be given our previous experience with dirt stockpiles. So I'd be, being fenced in, I think helps me. I'd want to make sure we're keeping on top of the height and making sure that the pile doesn't if it's fenced in, it's not really gonna grow too much in those dimensions, but if we have a 12-foot limit for materials, does that make sense for the stockpile as well? Other than that, just making sure it doesn't grow.
Yeah, I think the message that we want to be transparent on is this plan here is just like probably the first step. I mean, it's gonna be fluid, it's gonna be changing. I think if they get outside of our code or do something crazy, we'd have a conversation with them. We're partnering on the grading in terms of cost share agreements, so the only thing I can guarantee is it won't go exactly to plan.
Right.
But if we see something that's, out of context or code, we can approach them, and try to resolve it efficiently. I don't think these stockpiles, at least in comparison, this is a 4-story building in some cases, so I don't think the stockpile is gonna be like the main distraction, right? Like what we had at Tavera was farm fields with a stockpile next to woods. This is cranes, and so the cranes are gonna be
That's true.
at all times, so you probably won't feel like it's out of place. And it's really, by allowing this, and again, I want to be clear, we've kind of already agreed to the terms to work with them to do this, but we want, if we can keep it on this site, then it doesn't spill over into other sites, and that's really one of the goals we have.
Is the
Go ahead.
12-foot height for the rest of the materials, is that something that's specific on the agreement that we have?
This is just one of their most recent proposals. This isn't finalized. I think I would want to work with planning and code enforcement to identify anything that is of significance. I'd personally leave it more vague, and if there's a problem, I'd try to leave some caveat to address it. We're working through this right now with
Gotcha.
the city attorney. He's leading it. We just want to be, the main goal tonight was to say, hey, there's going to be a significant project with lots of fluidity. And we're going to be doing our grading project, then they're going to start their building project, and then next spring, we're going to come back in with the utilities and build the roads as they're building their building. So we're going to be working in the same area in close proximity. And there's a lot of, they're cost participants in a lot of this, and we're cost participating in some portions of it. And that's what's all agreed to in the development contract. So we're gonna have to resolve a lot of problems on the fly.
Is there gonna be signage on the fence and such as far as future St. Therese 4-story?
There's already a fence on the
Some
back.
dis-
There's a small.
Some description of it?
I would sure think so.
Okay.
I don't have, I guess if you have follow-up thoughts about this, work through Jessica. Again, the goal is just to put this in front of you and make you aware of it. And if you have follow-up questions, we can relay that and work towards it. We are working towards a closing in mid to early July, that we would need to finalize this agreement. But again, I don't know that we're bringing it back because it was part of, as long as it complies with the development agreement. I'm not sure we're bringing it back. Was the plan that I understood, but I think we're working within the code, and we're making sure that works, and that any of these costs would be borne to them for being able to work on a property, they need to restore it. So it's just meant to be, I'm repeating myself, as it's gonna be a flexible working agreement that if things come up, we wanna resolve them, I guess, as needed. We'll do our best to navigate that and ask all the questions and be transparent. I don't know if Natalie or Jessica have any more, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah, so any thoughts you have, we're certainly open to those. Keep this moving, but we're excited about that the project's still moving forward. Make it all work.
Thank you.
Thanks for the heads up. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay, with that, city council schedule, same as usual, we actually have 3 weeks out.
We have, yep.
We have a gap
3
week.
weeks. We have a bonus week, so we won't have a meeting again until the 14th of July. We do have a work session that day up to the 14th, and we'll be looking at potentially July 28th for a work session.
Commission.
No planning commission.
And there was no, it will be no planning commission on July 7th,
Really?
so.
Holy cow.
When's the last time that happened?
Not since I've been here. I can
Yeah.
tell you
It's
that
been a
much.
while,
And it probably will be a while.
and it probably will be a while based on all of these.
Okay, well, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Recording stopped.
Thank you all.
Do we have anyone still online?